So we are going to move to our next speaker, who is Nataka Moore. Nataka is a professor and psychologist at Adler University in Chicago, part of our U.S. Women and Cuba collaboration team.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Nataka Moore, and thank you, Jan, for that presentation, and thank you for having this time. So what I want to talk about is in the United States, Black women, Native birthing parents, Black birthing parents are dying. I want to talk about the fact that in the United States, even though the United States is one of the wealthiest countries that spends over $1 million toward this issue, Black mothers, Native mothers are dying. In 2021, 69.9 per 100,000 deaths was the maternal mortality rate for Black women, and Native women followed shortly after that, in comparison to 32.9% for the United States. Those numbers are staggering. Black women, Native women, Black birthing parents, Native birthing parents are dying. And it doesn't matter about the education. Research shows that Black women who have a college education are dying at higher rates than white women with a high school degree. And what's even interesting with that is that research also shows that 60% of women who are Black women and Native women who are dying during pregnancy or postpartum. So we need to figure out what is happening. And we know what's happening. We know that these numbers are rooted within a healthcare system that is built on racism with the intersectionality of sexism. We know that Black and Native women are dying because the healthcare professionals do not see our humanity. They do not believe us when we say that we are in pain. They do not understand the concept of weathering, which means living in this society and experiencing racism and sexism, and the intersectionality of that creates a weathering on our body that is painful. And so when we're seeing eclampsia, which is rooted within high blood pressure due to stress, and that's not being taken seriously, that is a preventable death. And so what does that bring us to here? How has the United States addressed it? And I'm going to put it in context of the Beijing Platform. So historically with the United States, a lot of our funding, grant funding that we throw at these issues are rooted within systems that believe in we're only going to alleviate the issue, we're not going to eradicate the issue, and those are two different things. And that is oftentimes rooted within what a lot of people don't know. And if you have read Dorothy Roberts' scholar, she's a scholar, and she's written Killing the Black Body. If you have read any of her work, we know that a lot of our philanthropy organizations have a history of the eugenics movement in the United States. And with the eugenics movement, the belief is that these issues are inherent to Black and Native women. And so therefore we can't eradicate it because we're not going to look at the social determinants of health. We're not going to look at residential schools. We're not going to look at slavery. We're not going to look at genocide. We're not going to look at the structures that have been built to maintain power. So we're going to only alleviate, and that's a problem. And so in order for us to really address this issue, we need to take a good look at the structures of the United States and look at the ways in which we're truly addressing this issue. And the Beijing Platform addresses those social determinants of health. We know that to truly see differences in Black women's and Black maternal health, Black infant health, and Native maternal health, it's going to take more than just giving funding to alleviate the issue. We need to eradicate it. We need to look at the action item of women in health. So what is one of the things that we know with women in health? We know that in the healthcare system, a lot of times medical students do not have to take diversity classes. They're not having to address the diversity of clients that they see. That would be eradicating. We know that we need to look at poverty. We know that the impact of not having housing, and we know in states across the United States, there's a housing crisis. We know that that impacts the birthing process. And so we need to look toward other countries. We need to look at what other folks are doing to address this issue. And we need to be in partnership with Cuba, who has really had a national platform of looking and addressing these issues by addressing and incorporating the Beijing Platform. And so the question is that how do we collaborate and work together to begin to address the issues in both countries? Cuba is a great example for the United States because we have similar histories. There was slavery in both countries. We know that there was racism in both countries. So what's happening in Cuba where they're having different results than in the United States? That's because of their willingness to address these issues uh, um, from a national place. And so I know that we have very little time, so I'm going to stop there and I'm going to pass it on to Jan to introduce the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much. For all of you, such a great panel. Thank you so much, Nataka, and I'm very pleased to introduce one of my very good friends, who's not only hosting us here at the Manhattan Neighborhood Network Studios, but is also president of the National Dominican Women's Caucus. Zenaida Mendez.
Buenas noches, good evening, everyone. I'm going to speak about violencia de género, violence against women, and what is really happening in the United States and Dominican Republic. In 2024, at least 4,323 women were victims of feminicide in 17 countries in Latin America. En los Estados Unidos y en la América Latina en particular, en más de 17 países, murieron por feminicidio 4,323 mujeres. Quiere decir que cada día mataban 12 mujeres al día. Eso es lo que equivale a eso. Cada 2 horas una mujer era asesinada por su compañero. Every 2 hours there was a woman that was killed by his partner, her partner. And that's happening in 17 countries in Latin America. And that's, I'm going to speak directly about Dominican Republic. La República Dominicana es uno de los países de Latinoamérica con las mayores tasas de feminicidio. Por cada 100 habitantes, cada día mueren 3 o 4 mujeres asesinadas por su compañero. Es una situación que está todos los días incrementando, una preocupación, porque las políticas que tenemos ahora mismo en realidad no se están usando para la prevención de estas situaciones que estamos viviendo. Hay proyecto congresional, el gobierno de poder implantar ciertas medidas, pero por alguna razón, esta es la hora que en el 2025, 2024 no se han podido implementar esas medidas. It is essential to read this data and knowing that domestic violence not only destroying women's lives, but also the children trapped in this content or aggression. Tenemos que tener en cuenta que no estamos hablando solamente de las mujeres que fallecen o la matan, pero estamos hablando de todos esos niños que se quedan huérfanos. En el 2024, por lo menos 1,118 mujeres que fueron asesinadas, quedaron huérfanos 2,158 niños. In 2024, and this is only some data, so it's many other that we don't have the data on hand. For about 2,158 children orphaned, left by the mother not gone. In the Dominican Republic, in the latest, many men that will kill their partner and kill themselves after. So those children are now orphaned. The father is not at home, the mother is not at home. So that is a big situation that we are very preoccupied about. Dominican Republic has the necessary mechanism and policies in place to fight gender-based violence. The country continues to have one of the highest feminine rates in the region. El Salvador has the worst statistic of Latin America, with 88 feminicide reported. almost daily. El Salvador es otro país que tiene un número muy elevado de asesinato, de feminicidio. Y eso es una situación que a nosotros nos urge bastante. Es importante que se implementen medidas. Nosotros aquí desde la diáspora, como le decimos, hemos así hecho sugerencias cuando han venido las autoridades dominicanas que vienen aquí muy a menudo, cada vez que están corriendo para un puesto político, se llevan bastante dinero de los dominicanos que vivimos aquí para sus campañas políticas. Every candidate for president of the Dominican Republic comes to New York in particular to raise funds. So we feel that the diaspora should be have a voice in what's going on in Dominican Republic. And we have made suggestions on how to eliminate violence. Hemos hecho sugerencias que en cada precinto, por lo menos de la policía, hayan expertos en psicología, personas entrenadas para bregar con esta situación. Porque si no, y también a través de toda la República, no puede ser simplemente en Santo Domingo, en la capital. Ya ellos saben los municipios y los lugares en la República Dominicana donde es más propicio que sucedan estas cosas. Pero la base de todo esto es la falta de educación. Yo creo que la educación se tiene que mejorar en todos los sentidos en la República Dominicana. Definitely education is the base. Education is missing, and so people understanding. And also the poverty. You know, people see what's going on in Dominican Republic, and it's really condemning the lack of willingness of the people in government, because right now the president of the Dominican Republic has the majority legislator from the same party. So some of the legislation that have been put forward, it should be already voted on. Las legislaciones que se han propuesto son legislaciones que el presidente actual de la República Dominicana, que tiene la mayoría de las personas en el Congreso de su partido, pudiera implementarse. Entonces, para nosotros en realidad nos sigue preocupando esa situación de la República Dominicana, también la falta de conocimiento. Por ejemplo, nosotros tenemos años bregando por las cosas causales, que la mujer pueda hacerse un aborto y que hagan 13 sesiones. Si la mujer está en peligro de muerte, el bebé ya se le ha muerto adentro. Es decir, que son decisiones muy pronunciadas las que se pudiera hacer eso. Y tenemos más de 20 años luchando por eso y no se consigue esas sesiones. Entonces, pero nosotros desde aquí, desde la diáspora, seguimos insistiendo y apoyando a las mujeres de la República Dominicana. We continue to work here from not only the women, the Dominican in the United States, but Dominican that are in Spain, in Germany, all over the world, trying to alleviate the situation in the Dominican Republic when it comes to feminicide, when it comes to women's right to choose and reproductive rights. But the base is also we have to increase a better education in the Dominican Republic. Tenemos que mejorar la educación en nuestro país y hacer más para que las niñas y los niños tengan la educación que es la base para poder respetarnos unos a los otros. So, in terms of making sure the girls and boys receive the same education so we can respect each other as a human being. So we have to continue to see how we take care of this situation and at least contribute from as far from Dominican Republic. But like I said, el presidente de la República Dominicana viene aquí por lo menos 4 o 5 veces al año. Se reúne con nosotros los líderes a escucharnos, pero de acción no hay nada. Entonces, ahí es que está la cosa. Entonces, bueno, we continue, continuamos haciendo lo que tenemos que hacer, haciendo propuestas. La ministra de la Mujer, Mayra Jiménez, se ha reunido con nosotras varias veces aquí, pero tampoco tiene los recursos en el Ministerio de la Mujer para hacer ciertas cosas. Entonces, es imperativo que los recursos lleguen. Es imperativo the Ministry of the Women in Dominican Republic also received the funding that it needed in order to continue to educate and to stop, or at least do some of the legislation that we are suggesting to stop violence against women. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zenaida. And we are pleased to then move to a special guest recording, and that is the Cuban ambassador to the United States, Leonis Torres Riviera, will be speaking about how U.S. foreign policy is the main barrier for Cuban women to fully advance their human rights in the Beijing Platform for Action.
Honorable delegates, colleagues, and friends, Cuba is a nation deeply committed to gender equality and women's empowerment. While we celebrate what we have achieved, we also recognize the persistent barriers Cuban women face in fully realizing our goals under the Beijing Platform for Action. Let us reflect on our progress, confront our challenges, and reaffirm our collective resolve to advance gender justice. Cuba's revolutionary spirit has placed gender equality at its core. Our Constitution guarantees equal rights, and we have ratified international frameworks like the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the 2022 Families Code, and provisions in the 2019 Constitution and the 2022 Penal Code reflects our country's commitment with the protection of women against gender violence. Cuban women hold a 99.7% literacy rate. We dominate higher education with 63% of university graduates and benefit from universal health care, maternal care, and abortion access. We hold 53% of parliamentary seats, by the way, second in ranking worldwide, and we hold the first place of women innovators and inventors per capita internationally. Although not institutionally, gender disparity, machismo, and other forms of gender discrimination still persist. But we work pretty hard to tackle these challenges in a progressive battle towards our goals. But despite our efforts, the U.S. blockade is an economic siege that exacerbates resources scarcity, limiting access to technology, medicine, and materials. Women, often household managers, bear the brunt of shortages. Cuba remains steadfast in its pursuit of gender equality. While internal transformations continue, the unjust U.S. blockade and terrorist designation remain the single greatest external barrier to our progress. We call on the international community to stand with us in condemning this policy and to support Cuba's effort to build a society where all women thrive. Together, let us turn our aspirations and goals into reality. Hasta la victoria siempre. Thank you so much.
Have great plans working together with her this year. You'll learn more about. I would like to then move to calls to action. You've heard so much incredible information, accomplishments, struggles, hopes, and where we want to go next. So I'm going to turn it over to Natasha Lucia Ora Bagnon, who is the co-chair of the Alliance for Cuba Engagement and Respect, or ACIRE. Thank you so much and welcome, Natasha.
Thank you. I hope everyone can. I'm going to speak in Spanish and I'll be translated. So, muchas gracias. Gracias por la invitación y por poderos acompañar esta noche. Tengo el privilegio de dirigirme a ustedes para hablar un poquitito de lo que como ciudadanos y ciudadanas americanas podemos hacer para ayudar al pueblo cubano y sobre todo a las mujeres cubanas a ir implementando y avanzando y adelantando en todas las medidas que hemos escuchado desde los últimos 50 años, pero sobre todo en la actualidad. Sabemos que estamos en tiempos muy complicados y lo que implica para el pueblo americano, pero realmente el pueblo global, mundial y el pueblo cubano en este sentido en particular. Desde ACERE, que es una organización cuya misión particular es derrotar el bloqueo, es atender, responder a todas las medidas legislativas y ejecutivas desde Washington que afectan a la soberanía, a la posibilidad y la capacidad del pueblo cubano de avanzar por medidas únicamente estadounidenses. Entonces, hemos escuchado muchas historias de cómo las mujeres cubanas han priorizado los derechos sociales y económicos y cómo continúan con el Código de la Familia, con la nueva Constitución, respondiendo desde el marco jurídico a la necesidad de proteger a sus ciudadanas, a las mujeres, a las niñas, a las familias, a las emprendedoras cubanas. Pero ¿qué es lo que impiden que logren esas metas y que puedan realmente responder a las necesidades del pueblo? A poder proveer el cuidado reproductivo, la salud reproductiva que necesitan, la medicina que necesitan las mujeres, sus familias, sus niños, que sus niños tengan el acceso a todos los materiales educativos que necesitan, que pueden emprender su propio negocio, lo que sea. Sabemos que son las políticas americanas desde los Estados Unidos y nosotros somos los que tenemos la posibilidad, únicamente nosotros y nosotras, la posibilidad de cambiar eso. El pueblo cubano solamente puede ejercer desde su espacio, desde su pueblo, pero realmente la responsabilidad primordial cae sobre nosotros. Y ese es el trabajo de hacer, de ver cómo acompañamos a la gente que quiere ver un cambio de política profunda en su propio gobierno. Ahora, con la administración de Trump, sabemos los múltiples retos que eso significa para nosotros, que incluye lo que hemos visto desde literalmente el primer día de la administración, que Cuba ha sido prioridad en términos de su política extranjera, de seguir con una guerra económica, atacando, tratando de deshumanizar al pueblo y interviniendo con su soberanía, inclusive ejerciendo presión sobre terceros países para que dejen de desarrollar sus propios sistemas de salud con médicos cubanos como entiendan mejor ellos. Vemos proyectos legislativos propuestos cuya meta es codificar la nefasta política de mantener a Cuba en una lista que supuestamente auspicia al terrorismo. Cuba fue quitada de esa lista en la primera semana de la administración de Biden. Pero el primer día de Trump la volvieron a poner en una lista que realmente no responde al problema de lo que es el terrorismo global, sino pretende solamente atacar al trabajo cubano de, de, de humanizar realmente su trabajo político, inclusive a través de sus brigadas médicas, que hemos visto en la pandemia, de tratar a brindar ayuda humanitaria a otros países, inclusive en el Caribe, inclusive a los Estados Unidos, cuando lo de los incendios y crisis que hemos tenido en los últimos años, que Cuba ha estado ahí. Pero su colocación en esa lista afecta seriamente al sector privado y al sector público, que el gobierno americano quisiera que nosotros pensáramos en el pueblo como si fueran dos pueblos distintos, dos pueblos diferentes, el que trabaja para el sector privado y el que trabaja para el sector público, pero realmente es un solo pueblo. Y el pueblo entero se ve afectado por la colocación de Cuba en esa lista. Hemos visto un proyecto de ley que pretende, como dije, codificar la presencia de Cuba en esa lista para que sea mucho más difícil para cualquier otra administración tomar una decisión ejecutiva de quitar a Cuba de esa lista. Hemos visto nuevamente ataques sobre el sistema de salud cubano y los médicos cubanos, las brigadas médicas. Hemos visto propuestas de restricciones de viaje, de ataques al sector turístico, que sabemos que de todas las medidas que vimos en la primera administración de Trump, quizás fue esa la que más impacto tuvo en cuanto a la economía de Cuba, porque como muchas islas, como muchos países isleños, viven del turismo. Y la merma del turismo ha afectado seriamente a la economía, inclusive del sector privado. Y no podemos descartar medidas mucho más agresivas que pueden salir de esta administración porque ellos mismos no lo han descartado. Tenemos que prepararnos para cualquier jugada o movida que pueda salir de la administración que va más allá de lo que hemos visto hasta ahora. Y por ende necesitamos movilizarnos. En hacer, hemos preparado herramientas para abogar directamente con los miembros de Congreso, con la administración, con información preparada para atender a todo proyecto de ley y para educar sobre lo que es el impacto que ha tenido, por ejemplo, Cuba en la lista de los países auspiciadores del terrorismo, quienes lo han denunciado públicamente desde las posiciones más altas de la región, del mundo, dentro del gobierno estadounidense, inclusive miembros del sector de seguridad nacional americano, diplomáticos que han salido ya de su posición, que han denunciado estas medidas que también interfieren con el verdadero trabajo de responder a lo que son actos de terrorismo que no tienen nada que ver con Cuba en el mundo, que afecta la seguridad de todos por mantener a la presencia de un país que ha hecho todo lo contrario en combatir el terrorismo, inclusive de colaborar con los Estados Unidos para hacerlo. Entonces, hace falta no solamente mantener la presión sobre nuestros propios miembros de Congreso, sino de esta administración y sus representantes, que sabemos que con Marco Rubio como secretario de Estado, que tiene una guerra personal con Cuba, que ya va a visitar la región esta semana o antes del fin del mes, y los miembros del Caribe han respondido claramente que no se van a dejar presionar por, eh, por una campaña mediática de esta administración y necesitamos mantener esa presión desde nuestra posición. En la página de ACERE encontrarán información, folletos, contactos de cada miembro de Congreso, de Senado y un guión que pueden usar para llamar y para mandar correos con información sobre todas las medidas actuales a las que tenemos que o promover o defender o convencer a que voten en su contra. Por favor, también les exijo, les suplico que todos se inscriban en la página de ACERE para mantenerse actualizado con nuestro boletín, que cada vez que se vaya a presentar un proyecto de ley que tenga que ver con Cuba, les vamos a mantener informados de cómo podemos responder desde ejerciendo nuestro voto y voz a la vez, que es sumamente importante porque, como siempre he dicho, tenemos ciudadanos americanos podemos hacer lo que los cubanos no pueden hacer, que es hacer que nuestro propio gobierno rinda cuenta y que responda a otros intereses. Lo que vimos bajo Obama, sí, mi amor, lo que vimos bajo Obama fue una unión de muchos sectores que tenía interés en ver a un, disculpen que tengo mi cubanito, mi hijo, aquí conmigo, que está exigiendo un poquito de atención. Hemos visto que hay muchos sectores realmente que a lo mejor no salen siempre a público para denunciar las medidas, pero que realmente les interesa una relación normalización de relaciones entre ambos países, que es lo que necesitamos promover. Yo sé que estamos muy atrasados y no tenemos mucho, no nos queda mucho tiempo, pero que sepan que ACERE es una fuente de información, un buen recurso que les puedes acompañar en su abogacía personal, individual, comunitaria, organizacional, y que podemos ayudarles a llegar directamente a los miembros que necesitamos convencer, por decirlo así, que la verdadera política que necesitamos y que queremos como ciudadanos y ciudadanas es una desde la dignidad y la integridad y la humanidad de todos los pueblos. Gracias.
Nos habla ella.
Thank you.
Where is she? Where?
Thank you.
Vive en Cuba. Ah, vive en Cuba.
Where is she
She's, ya ven, Cuba.
No, I believe she's here right now.
No. Vive en La Habana.
Thank you, Natasha, and the beautiful child, your beautiful son that you had with you. He's starting political education very young, as we always will. Last but never least is my great pleasure to introduce Cindy Domingo. I'd like to call her our fearless leader. She is the chair and coordinator, co-founder of our U.S. Women in Cuba collaboration. She also co-chairs with Lenny Reeves. I want to give a shout out. She's been staffing our chat and making sure we're as coordinated as we can possibly be. But let me turn it over to Cindy, who is been co-chairing the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom's Cuba and Bolivarian Alliance Committee. Take it away, Cindy. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan, and welcome to our sisters and brothers, I think, from Cuba. It's always wonderful to have you here in the United States, and I hope you will be allowed to come in next year so that we can update people about the status of Cuban women and girls and the work that you are doing to advance equality in your society. I hope to join you tomorrow and also at the Cuba conference on Saturday. What the point of educating ourselves about the advancements of women and girls in Cuba under the relatively new Cuban Constitution is that we need to do something in this country because it is our country, our government that is the main impediment to the advancement of women and girls and overall the Cuban people in their own country. So what I want to talk a little bit about before we go into question and answers is what you can do to build a strong U.S. women's movement dedicated to ending the U.S. government blockade against Cuba and to creating mutually beneficial U.S.-Cuba relations. Our work advances the right of all women in the context of universal human rights. And we want to share the Cuban experience because it can advance and empower women, especially in our country, who know nothing about the Cuban Revolution and the advancements of Cuban women and girls and the Cuban Constitution, and the role that the Federation of Cuban Women has played over the decades to promote women and girls' equality in their society. So I want to talk a little bit about, we were founded in the early 2000s, but people like Jan Strout has been doing this work 10 years before the founding of our organization. And Wilf Women's International League for Peace and Freedom is the oldest women's peace organization, over 100 years old. And way before we were created in the U.S. Women and Cuba collaboration, WILF US and WILF International was working in solidarity with the Cuban people to fix U.S. foreign policy and to end the U.S. blockade. So we have two major projects that we want to promote through this webinar and through the UN CSW and the US-Cuba Normalization Conference and other work that we want to continue. First, we want, as Natasha was saying, the work in Congress is very important. And unfortunately, many of the women and men especially do not know anything about the advancement of women, of the women's rights agenda in Cuba. And maybe, just maybe, especially in this period when Marco Rubio is even harshening the blockade even more, maybe women especially are in Congress will understand that Cuba is the key to advancing women's rights internationally because of the example they have set. So in the fall of this year, we would like your help to organize an educational and advocacy day in Washington, D.C., to educate our Congress on the advancements of women and girls in Cuba as a model for what we want in this country. We not only want to, as Nataka was talking about and Zenaida, we not only want to reverse the setbacks in our country in terms of women's rights, but we want to project a forward future of what women's rights looks like in this country as advanced by the Cuban women's movement and Cuba as a whole. And so we are hoping to organize, with your help, that educational and advocacy day. And we invite you to join us in our planning committee to do that. And over the next year, in order to build up towards that, over the next few months, in order to work up to that advocacy day, we want to educate people about the Beijing Platform for Action. And in fact, in all our projects, we want to do that so that people will understand the vision that was set out 30 years ago by thousands of women of what a platform for action, what does women's equality look like? And what are the platforms that we must address? And we want to try to get and to show what Cuba's commitment to advancing that Beijing Platform for Action has looked like and what work they did. We would also, after that advocacy day, plan for a late fall delegation to Cuba that will focus on our theme of how Cuba's women's movement has implemented the Beijing Platform for Action and what are the barriers that remain in the full implementation of the platform. If you can't join us, but we hope that you can join us, and we hope that travel will still be an opportunity for all of you to take. We would like travel with any other organization so that you can see Cuba yourself, because that is the best way to become familiar and educated with Cuba. Natasha talked about, lobbying your Congress people about removing Cuba off of the list of state sponsors of terrorism. And there is the bill has not been sponsored again, but there is a bill called the Forced Act that would then make it difficult. It would take an act of Congress to remove Cuba off the list of state sponsors of terrorism. So we will be organizing not only to remove Cuba off the list of state sponsors of terrorism, but also to stop the Force Act from taking place. We would like you to write letters, editorials, and media outlets, post social media information from our Facebook pages and newsletters about the reality of Cuba and the impact of the US blockade, especially if you're able to travel to Cuba this year. Talk about the reality of Cuba. Talk about there's the vast difficulties that the blockade is presenting to the Cuban people, and talk to the women and girls about what kind of difficulties they have. Sign up through our email address to receive our newsletters, Women in Cuba, womenincuba@gmail.com, to receive our newsletters, information on the campaign to get off the list of state sponsors of terrorism. I posted the website of ASERI, and joining our campaigns and information on our Advocacy Day and delegation. They'll all be posted on our website, www.womenandcuba.org. We also have a project called the Lesbian Allies Project, and they will be, and in fact, they will be having a webinar next Wednesday at 1:30 Pacific Standard Time, and talking about how the Cuban Constitution is an inclusive constitution in which it has granted more rights to the LGBTQIA communities, but in relationship to their to not only the difficulties forced upon the Cuban people, we are launching a new economic development project in Cuba with our sister lesbian group called Phoenix, who are located in Cienfuegos. The new project will initially make reusable menstrual pads and hopefully expand to make products that are necessary for Cuban women and girls that are difficult, and oftentimes not just difficult, but nowhere to be found because of the US blockade. I know that many of us in this country cannot imagine being without menstrual products, but of course there are many low-income, poor women who also in this country do not have access to menstrual pads. But it is even a dire situation in Cuba. So we hope we are still developing that project, but we will be raising funds and support. And if you come in our delegation in the fall, we will be doing more work around that particular project. Lastly, I hope you will join us this weekend at the Saturday and Sunday you can do it in person or virtually by going to the website and registering www.us-cubanormalizationconference.org. And at that conference, we will also be presenting with the Federation of Cuban Women a workshop on reproductive justice in Cuba and the US. So you can register and attend that whether you are there at the conference or virtually. So we have a lot of work. And it's important work, especially in this period when there's so much hostility towards Cuba in particular. We are expecting new regulations, executive orders to be passed down by this administration. And so we really need your help to keep Cuba in the spotlight and not to let the Cuban people be forgotten, even in the midst of the attacks that we face in the United States. So I'm going to turn, we have a few more minutes, I think 10 minutes before we close, if we wanted to take any questions and answers that people might have. So we would open up, if you could raise your hand. I think we have that function available to us. If you could raise your hand if you have any questions, and we could take those. Anyone? Oh, we don't have any questions. Oh, Jan, you're on mute. Jan, you're on me. Are you talking, Jan? Oh. No, okay.
Can you?
Go ahead.
Oh, great. I think Zenaida was asking where the conference is going to be over the weekend in New York at the Betty and Malcolm X Betty Shabazz and Malcolm X Center. All day Saturday, dancing into the night.
Yes. So it starts, the conference starts at noon Eastern time, but the site is open from 10 to noon, and there'll be registration, a lot of people there that you can interface with, as well as literature tables. And then there'll be openings. You go on the website and the entire program is on there. The Federation of Cuban Women will be speaking. The representative from ECAP was also with the Federation of Cuban Women here in the United States, and video messages from a couple of Congress people. And we'll move into the workshops about 1:30. And there are
Really
4 different workshops.
promises to be very exciting. We've got a portion of the Cuban delegation right at the table, but it's probably double or triple when you have a chance to go to the conference and really meet people and hear a variety of perspectives, accomplishments, and of course, challenges that we're working all hard in solidarity to address. So that's a great opportunity. And for those of you across our country, perhaps out of this country, do take advantage of some of the hybrid opportunities, because the workshops look stunning, including ours on reproductive justice.
I put the website to register and look at the agenda in the chat. Well,
Do you want to comment on anything before we close?
Nosotros queríamos agradecer en primer lugar todos los comentarios en la explicación que cada una de las compañeras han tenido, y también la solidaridad, no solamente a favor de la igualdad de género y todo lo que hemos avanzado en el país, sino todo lo que se ha evaluado aquí, que sabemos que así mismo sucede cotidianamente en virtud de todos los proyectos y todas las cosas que desarrollan con Cuba, vinculado a la eliminación del bloqueo. Y también de esa espuria lista de países supuestamente patrocinadores del terrorismo, y todas las limitaciones que eso representa para Cuba, y sobre todo que impacta en las mujeres, que es la principal vía obstáculo hoy del desarrollo. De verdad que le agradecemos, y vamos a estar ahí en composición en algunos momentos multiplicada por la cantidad de eventos que tenemos, pero sí vamos a estar en esos talleres y vamos a seguir trabajando juntos. Así que muchísimas gracias a Cindy y a todas las demás.
thank you. Thank you for coming. And thank you every year for participating with us and educating us on Cuba, and especially the advancements that you have made in your country. You are truly an inspiration to all of us. And for me, I just returned from a trip from the Philippines, and I look to my sisters in Cuba as the inspiration to change things in my own home country. So thank you very much.
En la Filipina.
Sí, Filipinas.
So I hope you will join us in our webinar next week, as well as Saturday. And we look forward to working with you in our future work. I want to close by thanking Jan Stroud, who always is, who is at the CSW this year, along with Cynthia Roberts. And Moon Vasquez will be there on Friday to carry out our work for the Lesbian Allies Project. And I want to thank the organizations that co-sponsored this event, the WILF US and WILF Cuba and the Bolivarian Alliance, the National Dominican Women's Caucus, the Women's Intercultural Network Cities for CEDAW, Code Pink, Women for Peace, Women of Vision, and the Literacy Project. And I want to thank especially Natasha Bannon, who, thank God, is in the United States during this period of time and could join us. my colleague on ASERI, in which I also work in. So thank you all. And I put my email, I put the email of the U.S. Women in Cuba collaboration, women in Cuba at gmail.com and gmail.org. And if you, no, gmail.com. And I hope you will contact us to participate in our work. Thank you all. Oh, and Amy Leong for always, you always need a younger person to run the tech stuff. So thank you to Amy for helping us do this. Thank you all, and Nataka for joining us also.